The plane glided smoothly above the sprawling patchwork of New York below, the sun glinting off the rooftops, painting them gold. The cabin hummed with the familiar chatter of passengers settling into their seats, the occasional clatter of trays, the soft thrum of the engines creating a rhythmic backdrop to the morning flight. 12-year-old Emma pressed her face against the small window, her nose leaving a foggy imprint on the glass as she traced the tiny cars crawling along the streets far beneath her. Her brown eyes sparkled with curiosity, absorbing every detail, every flicker of movement, every shadow cast by the towering buildings. "Emma, remember, don't lean too hard on the window," her father whispered, tugging gently at her sleeve. He had insisted on sitting beside her on this flight, knowing how fascinated she was with airplanes. Emma had always been captivated by how machines could defy gravity, soar effortlessly, and carry dozens of people safely through the skis. She had begged for a window seat, and her father had smiled, recalling his own childhood fascination with aviation. "Don't worry, Dad," Emma said, her voice light but tinged with excitement. "I'm just looking." She tilted her head, studying the tiny people moving like ants below. "Look at them. They look so small from up here." Her father chuckled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Soon, you'll see why pilots love this view. It's magical. There's nothing like it in the world." The flight attendants began moving down the aisle, their uniforms crisp, smiles polite and practiced. They carried trays of drinks and small snacks, offering them with gentle reminders of safety and comfort. Some passengers accepted with gratitude, while others remained absorbed in books, tablets, or quiet conversation. The routine of the cabin was comforting, a predictable rhythm that reassured everyone aboard. Yet Emma noticed something unusual. A faint flicker of light in the cockpit caught her attention. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but her young, observant eyes caught it immediately. She squinted, trying to make sense of the blinking indicator she had never seen before. It seemed off. She mentioned it casually to her father. "Dad, is that light supposed to be blinking like that?" Her father glanced toward the cockpit but waved it off with a shrug. "Probably just a routine check or a minor system indicator. Nothing to worry about. The pilots are professionals. They know what they're doing." Emma nodded, though unease tickled the back of her mind. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass again, studying the planes on the tarmac below. Their engines were silent from this height, but she imagined the immense power contained within them, ready to carry them safely through thousands of kilometers. Passengers laughed and exchanged casual conversations, some pointing at the clouds outside, others scrolling through phones. The hum of the engines was steady, a soothing constant. For a moment it all seemed perfect. Calm, predictable, safe. Then without warning, a dull thud echoed through the cabin. It was subtle at first, easily mistaken for turbulence, a bump in the air. But the thud repeated, irregular and persistent, catching the attention of more than just Emma. Heads turned. Eyes scanned the ceiling panels, the overhead compartments, the cabin crew. The flight attendants exchanged uncertain glances, their smiles faltering slightly. "Just a bit of turbulence," one murmured to the nearby passengers, though her voice lacked conviction. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had flown before, but something about this didn't feel like ordinary turbulence. The sound was different, mechanical, almost deliberate, like a warning. She pressed her hands to the glass, trying to see if there was anything outside that could explain it. Clouds drifted lazily, sunlight piercing through in golden beams, but the world outside remained calm. Only inside, in the hum of the plane, something felt off. The intercom crackled suddenly, a brief burst of static, then silence. The voice of the captain, normally calm and reassuring, failed to come through. The cabin went quiet for a beat, passengers pausing mid-conversation, straining to hear. Then another attempt, silence. The flight attendants frowned, moving toward the cockpit doors, their hands hovering over the access panels. Emma's father noticed the shift in the cabin atmosphere. "Something's not right," he said under his breath, his eyes narrowing slightly. Emma clutched his arm, a knot of fear tightening in her stomach. A young mother whispered to her child, "It's okay, everything's fine," but her own voice trembled. Passengers shifted in their seats, murmuring anxiously to one another. The rhythm of the cabin, once comforting, now seemed fragile, precarious. The hum of the engines continued, but the human element, the pilots' voices, had vanished. Emma felt a surge of awareness, a strange clarity that contrasted with her fear. Her father had often shown her how planes worked in a simulator, teaching her basic concepts of flight. She had watched him manipulate controls, adjust altitudes, maintain course. She never thought she would need that knowledge in real life, at this height, surrounded by dozens of people relying on her awareness. The cabin crew tried again, pressing the intercom, knocking gently on the cockpit door. Still no response. Panic began to ripple outward, passengers whispering, some crying quietly. A man clutched his seat, muttering prayers under his breath. The steady calm that had defined the flight now shattered into chaos. Emma's gaze moved to the cockpit. The door was locked, but the light flickering inside drew her closer. Her curiosity, her instinct, and an emerging sense of responsibility propelled her forward. Fear was present, yes, but it was accompanied by an undeniable determination. Her father noticed her movement, eyes widening. "Emma, wait, don't go near the cockpit." But Emma's mind was already made up. Something had to be done. The pilots were unresponsive. The plane, though still flying, was in unknown peril. Every second counted. She pressed her small hands to the door, took a deep breath, and whispered to herself, "I can do this. I have to." The cabin continued to buzz with tension behind her. Flight attendants whispered frantic instructions to passengers, trying to maintain calm. The autopilot thrummed steadily, but Emma knew instinctively that it could not manage every nuance. Her heart pounded, adrenaline flooding her veins. The calm before the storm had ended. What came next would demand courage, quick thinking, and a will to survive that far exceeded her 12 years. And at that moment, Emma stepped forward, the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. A 12-year-old girl poised to face the unimaginable was about to confront the chaos at 4.5 kilometers above the earth. The plane had gone silent. The pilots were unconscious, and every life hung in the balance. The cabin had descended into an eerie tension. Murmurs turned into frightened whispers, whispers into cries. The intercom remained silent, the pilots unresponsive. Flight attendants dashed up and down the aisles, attempting to reassure passengers, their practiced smiles faltering with every unanswered call to the cockpit. A man clutched his forehead, muttering prayers, while a woman hugged her child tightly, rocking back and forth, whispering, "It's going to be okay." But no one could ignore the sense of impending danger that had seeped into every corner of the plane. Emma's heart pounded fiercely, yet a strange clarity settled over her. She scanned the cockpit door, remembering the brief simulator sessions her father had allowed her to explore. She had learned how to manipulate the autopilot, how to adjust altitude, even the basics of controlling the yoke. A flicker of memory surfaced, how the simulator had felt under her small hands, the way the plane had responded to subtle nudges and careful adjustments. She swallowed hard, realizing the magnitude of what she was about to consider. Beside her, her father noticed her tense posture. "Emma, what are you thinking?" he asked, voice tight with worry. His eyes darted between her and the cockpit, understanding dawning. She began, voice trembling but determined. "I think I can try to help." Her father's jaw tightened, torn between fear and pride. "It's not safe, Emma, you're a child." "But the pilots, they're not moving. The plane needs someone," she said firmly, glancing around at the anxious faces of the passengers. Fear shone in her eyes, but beneath it was something stronger, responsibility. She wasn't going to just sit back and wait. Every second mattered. Lives depended on her noticing, on her action. A flight attendant approached, eyes wide, realizing Emma's resolve. "She might be our only option," she whispered to another crew member. They glanced at the cockpit door, fear mixed with hope. Could a 12-year-old actually manage what no adult had yet been able to attempt under these extreme circumstances? Emma's hands gripped the railing as she stepped toward the cockpit. Each step felt heavy, but every heartbeat reinforced her determination. She reached the door, feeling the cool metal beneath her fingers. She knocked softly, then pressed the door release lever. It clicked. She peeked inside, her breath catching. The cockpit was chaotic. Both pilots slumped over their controls, unconscious. Warning lights blinked red, alarms shrilled intermittently, and the plane tilted slightly, responding to subtle air currents. Emma's stomach churned, but she focused. Panic flared around her, but she blocked it out, recalling the instructions her father had once given her. Step by step, she could manage small adjustments, keep the plane steady, prevent it from tilting dangerously. "Emma," a voice whispered behind her. It was her father, eyes wide but steady, full of cautious trust. "Just do what you remember, breathe. You can do this." She nodded, swallowing fear, and stepped fully into the cockpit. The alarms were deafening now, and the plane wobbled slightly as if testing her resolve. She approached the yoke, gripping it with both hands, feeling the vibration of the controls under her fingers. Her small hands barely fit around it, but she adjusted instinctively, nudging the plane level again. Passengers pressed toward the cockpit windows, watching in disbelief as the child assumed command. Phones were raised, some recording, some praying silently. The entire cabin seemed suspended in shock. Could it be true? A 12-year-old girl was about to pilot a commercial airplane in a real emergency. The autopilot hummed uncertainly, struggling with minor fluctuations in altitude. Emma carefully studied the blinking instruments, recalling which buttons her father had highlighted during their simulator lessons. She nudged the autopilot lever, following the faint memory of sequences she had practiced. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the plane stabilized. Her heart raced, but the first victory, however small, surged through her like electricity. A woman in the front row gasped aloud. She's controlling it." "Yes," muttered a man beside her, wide-eyed. "Somehow she is." Emma heard the faint static of the radio and decided to try it. "Hello, anyone, ATC," she squeaked. The voice that responded was hesitant, almost incredulous. "Child, are you serious? Who is this?" ATC's voice cracked with disbelief. "My name is Emma. The pilot's there, they're not awake. I'm trying to help." The line went silent for a moment. Then the voice returned, calmer but measured. "Emma, okay. Listen carefully. We'll guide you. Keep the plane steady. Follow our instructions. You can do this." Emma's pulse thundered in her ears. She adjusted the yoke slowly, cautiously, feeling the plane respond. Each tiny correction was deliberate. She spoke aloud, more to steady herself than for anyone else. "Okay, stay calm, steady, level." Her voice, though small, carried authority, precision. In the cabin, passengers clung to seats, murmuring prayers or holding hands. Some were crying, others whispered in disbelief. Flight attendants tried to maintain calm, now subtly guiding the crowd back from panic. The hum of the engines, once routine, now underscored the fragility of life and the weight of responsibility resting on a child's shoulders. A sudden jolt of turbulence sent drinks spilling and overhead compartments rattling. Emma's small hands clenched the controls, nudging the plane back level. Her stomach dropped as another alarm beeped, but she ignored it, focusing entirely on the plane's attitude and speed. Each breath she took was measured, a deliberate effort to stay in control. "Emma," her father whispered from behind, "you're doing it. You're keeping it steady. Keep going." Encouragement strengthened her resolve. The fear remained, but determination surged. She was no longer just a passenger. She had become a lifeline for every person on that plane. The autopilot steadied for a moment, but Emma knew this was just the beginning. The plane was still at 4.5 kilometers, the descent yet to be managed, the landing not yet in sight. Every second was precious, and every decision critical. She glanced back at the cabin one last time, eyes meeting those of strangers who had suddenly come to rely on a 12-year-old girl. And she realized with a mixture of terror and clarity that she could not fail. Not now, not ever. The chaos had begun, and Emma was ready to face it. Emma's small hands trembled as they rested on the controls of the cockpit. The alarms were blaring now, a relentless cacophony that threatened to drown out her focus. Both pilots remained slumped over, unconscious, their radios silent. The plane hummed and vibrated under her touch, a reminder that this was no simulation. Every decision mattered. She took a deep, shaky breath, forcing her mind to calm. One step at a time, she reminded herself. Step by step, she could stabilize the plane. Her father hovered just outside the cockpit, watching every move. He felt fear gnaw at him, but pride and relief surged as he realized his daughter wasn't frozen by terror. She was thinking, acting, assessing. "Emma, just do what you remember," he murmured. "Keep it steady. Listen to the plane. You can do this." Emma nodded, swallowing hard. She scanned the control panel, her eyes darting from the altimeter to the throttle to the yaw indicators. Each gauge was foreign, yet familiar from hours of simulator lessons with her dad. She reached for the autopilot lever and nudged it gently, recalling how small adjustments could correct big swings. The plane steadied slightly, tilting less dramatically. Her heart leapt with cautious relief. One small victory, but it mattered. "Steady, steady," she whispered aloud, almost as if speaking would anchor her focus. Her voice, though small, held a growing authority. She moved to the radio, pressing the button again. "ATC, it's me. I'm trying to help." The voice on the other end crackled, still laced with disbelief. "Emma, we're listening. Slow, small adjustments. Do not panic. Focus on keeping the plane level. You are doing fine." The encouragement was like a lifeline. Emma adjusted the yoke, nudging the plane slightly left, then back right. Each movement was careful, deliberate, guided by instinct and memory. The hum of the engines became a background rhythm, almost like a heartbeat syncing with hers. She realized she could hear subtle changes in pitch and vibration, the plane's way of communicating with her hands. She glanced at the pilots, their pale faces almost serene despite the chaos. Her fear spiked. What if she made a wrong move? What if the plane tilted too sharply or the altitude dropped too quickly? But she pushed the panic aside, focusing entirely on one task: keep the plane from falling. Passengers pressed closer to the cockpit windows, wide-eyed, murmuring encouragement. Some prayed, some cheered softly, some just held onto loved ones. A child across the aisle hid under a blanket, trembling, while a mother whispered, "She's doing it, she's saving us." Emma's heart swelled, though fear still coursed through her veins. She wasn't just controlling a plane, she was controlling hope itself. The autopilot flinched slightly, unable to compensate for minor turbulence. Emma gritted her teeth and nudged the yoke manually, feeling the plane respond beneath her fingers. She adjusted the throttle, following the rhythm of the engines, then reached for the flap lever, recalling her father's instructions about small, precise movements. The plane straightened. She exhaled sharply, relief mingled with adrenaline. A sudden jolt of turbulence shook the plane violently, spilling drinks and tossing papers across the cabin. Emma's stomach dropped, but she steadied herself, gripping the controls with both hands. "Focus. Breathe steady," she whispered, her voice a mantra. Each command she whispered seemed to echo in the cockpit, a tether to control, a shield against panic. From the cabin, her father's voice reached her, calm but insistent. "Emma, small adjustments. Listen to the engines. You've got this." She nodded to herself, following his guidance. Slowly, the plane leveled again. Emma realized something profound: she could do this. She could manage, control, stabilize. Her fear hadn't vanished, but it had been replaced by purpose, by a sense of responsibility that dwarfed her 12 years. "Emma, there's something else," ATC's voice crackled. "You'll need to maintain this altitude while we prepare instructions for descent. It won't be easy, but you're the only one who can do it right now." Her pulse raced. Descent. She had never attempted that, not even in a simulator at home. But there was no other option. Lives depended on her. She glanced at the yaw indicator, the altimeter, and the heading display. She could remember her father explaining that small, measured corrections were safer than large, abrupt movements. Emma's mind raced through her memory of each step. First, maintain level flight. Second, adjust speed. Third, minor corrections for tilt. Fourth, communicate. She took a deep breath and nudged the throttle carefully, then adjusted the yoke in small, deliberate motions. The plane responded, slowly descending, the altimeter showing a controlled drop. The cabin watched silently, tension palpable. Every small success brought a whisper of hope, a flicker of disbelief. The realization that a child was piloting their lives sent shivers through the passengers. Some wept quietly, some clasped hands in prayer, others simply stared, hearts pounding. Emma noticed the blinking lights on the control panel, alerts she didn't fully understand. Panic threatened to rise, but she ignored the fear. She could stabilize the plane. That was enough for now. Step by step, minute by minute, she could keep everyone alive. A stewardess leaned into the cockpit slightly, whispering encouragement. "You're amazing, Emma, just keep going." Emma smiled faintly, despite the alarms and chaos. She had never imagined herself in this position, yet here she was, calm and determined, guiding a plane of dozens of people through a crisis no adult would envy. Her small hands, guided by instinct, memory, and courage, had begun to turn panic into order. And in that moment, Emma realized the truth. Bravery was not the absence of fear, but action despite it. At 12 years old, at 4.5 kilometers above the Earth, she had stepped into the unknown, and she was holding it together, one deliberate movement at a time. The plane, though still trembling slightly from turbulence and alarms, had stabilized enough for her to plan the next steps. She exhaled, hands trembling slightly, eyes fixed on the horizon outside the cockpit window. The real challenge was just beginning. Descent, landing, and survival. Emma's hands were steady now, but her heart hammered like a drum in her chest. The alarms continued their shrill cries, warning lights blinking insistently across the cockpit panel. She pressed the radio button, voice shaking slightly but determined. "Hello, ATC, this is Emma. The pilots, they're unconscious. I'm trying to help." Silence. Then came the crackle of static, followed by a voice tinged with disbelief and confusion. "Child, are you serious? Who is this speaking?" Emma swallowed hard, gripping the yoke. "I'm 12, my name is Emma. The pilots, they're not moving. I don't know what else to do. Please help me." The voice hesitated, processing what it had just heard. "Emma, okay. Listen, we'll guide you step by step. You can do this, just keep calm." Her pulse thundered in her ears. Step by step. That was all she needed. Her small hands shook, but she placed them back on the yoke, adjusting gently, nudging the plane to a more level position. Turbulence jostled the aircraft, throwing a sudden dip that made her stomach lurch, but she followed ATC's instructions precisely, countering every tilt, every sway. From the cabin, passengers pressed against the windows, wide-eyed, some holding hands tightly, others whispering prayers. A few had tears streaming down their faces, mouths hanging open in disbelief. Phones recorded the impossible, as if this miraculous event needed proof to be believed. A flight attendant clutched her clipboard, whispering words of encouragement to anyone who would listen. ATC's voice guided her patiently, carefully. "Emma, throttle up slightly, maintain speed, keep the nose level, good, very good." The calm, measured instructions acted as an anchor, steadying her racing mind. Each small success, the plane leveling, the alarms slightly easing, filled her with cautious confidence. Emma spoke aloud to focus herself, almost a mantra. "Throttle level, nose steady, keep calm, I can do this." Her voice, though small, carried authority born from necessity. She began to understand a profound truth. She could do this one step at a time, one precise, deliberate move at a time. The autopilot struggled intermittently, alarms flickering, but Emma's instinctive corrections stabilized the plane. Her hands moved deftly, nudging the yoke, adjusting the throttle, watching every gauge with careful attention. She had never felt more alive or more terrified. A sudden bump of turbulence sent a tray spilling and a small child clinging to his mother, whimpering. Emma's stomach flipped, but she refused to panic. "Steady, steady," she whispered. She could feel the plane's vibrations, almost like it was alive, communicating its subtle needs to her tiny hands. "Emma," ATC's voice continued, calm and steady, "we need to prepare for descent. It will be tricky, but you can manage it. Focus on small movements. Keep the plane level." Descent. The word made her heart skip, panic trying to creep back in. She had never landed a plane, not even in a simulator, but there was no time for fear. Lives depended on her. Step by step, she could do this. She recalled her father's lessons: maintain level flight first, adjust speed second, then make small corrections. Each step needed to be deliberate, precise. Passengers pressed closer to the cockpit windows, straining to see. Their disbelief was palpable. A 12-year-old girl was piloting a plane with no adult guidance other than remote instructions from ATC. Some whispered encouragement, some prayed, some simply watched with frozen awe. The gravity of the situation, the fragility of life hanging in the balance, made each breath, each second, feel monumental. A stewardess leaned into the cockpit slightly, whispering words of encouragement. "You're amazing, Emma. You're saving us all." Emma's lips curved into a faint, tense smile. She felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just about piloting a plane. It was about maintaining hope, instilling calm, and taking responsibility when no one else could. She nudged the yoke gently to correct a slight tilt, adjusted the throttle, and kept her eyes on the horizon outside the cockpit window. Clouds stretched endlessly beneath her, golden with sunlight, while the cityscape below seemed impossibly distant. The plane responded to her touch, a fragile dance of physics and courage. "Good, Emma, excellent," ATC's voice came over the radio. "Keep it level, you're doing perfectly. Minor adjustments only. You've got this." Her confidence grew, but the alarms were relentless. Warning lights blinked, indicating minor system failures. She ignored them, focusing on the essentials: altitude, heading, speed, control. Every decision was critical. One wrong move could spell disaster. Yet she moved deliberately, guided by instinct, memory, and growing courage. From the cabin, passengers clutched each other, their expressions a mixture of terror and wonder. Children hid behind seats, but their parents whispered reassurances, believing in Emma's ability. The surreal reality of the situation made it almost cinematic, the impossible unfolding before their very eyes. Suddenly, a burst of turbulence jolted the plane violently. Emma's stomach flipped, but she countered instinctively, nudging the yoke with precision, adjusting throttle and flaps. The plane leveled, stabilized, responding to her tiny hands. She exhaled sharply, the first real breath of relief since the ordeal began. ATC's voice returned, calm and instructive. "Emma, well done. We need to start thinking about preparing for approach. Keep the plane steady. We'll guide you through each step." Her heart pounded. Approach. Landing. The word alone made her knees weak, but she gritted her teeth, her resolve unwavering. She had come this far, she could not falter now. Step by step she could manage. Minute by minute she could keep everyone alive. Emma looked at the passengers' faces on the screens, the cameras inside the cabin capturing her every move. She drew strength from them, knowing that dozens of lives now depended on her courage and focus. Fear remained, but it no longer controlled her. Responsibility had replaced it. A stewardess placed a gentle hand on Emma's shoulder. "You're doing it. We're all watching. We believe in you." Emma nodded, feeling a surge of determination. The plane, alarms blaring, autopilot flinching, turbulence rocking, now felt manageable in her small but capable hands. She had faced the unknown and survived. The descent would come, but for now she had achieved the impossible. Steady flight, hope intact, lives hanging by a thread, but alive. At 4.5 kilometers above the ground, a 12-year-old girl had become the pilot, the savior, and the beacon of hope for everyone. The impossible was, and the story had only just begun. The plane lurched violently as turbulence struck, a sudden, merciless shake that made passengers scream and clutch seats. Emma's stomach dropped, but her hands remained firm on the yoke. She adjusted the throttle carefully, nudging the flaps as ATC's calm voice guided her. Small movements, Emma. Minor adjustments, don't. Each tremor sent waves of fear through the cabin, but Emma blocked it, focusing entirely on the rhythm of the plane. Sweat streamed down her face, her brown hair sticking to her forehead. Her eyes flicked between the altimeter, the heading indicator, and the radar display. Every dial, every gauge was now a lifeline. The autopilot had faltered entirely. She was flying manually. For a child 12 years old, the weight of responsibility was unimaginable. Yet she pressed on, each deliberate movement of the yoke, each throttle adjustment a battle against panic. From the cabin, passengers clutched each other, whispering prayers, murmuring encouragement, or staring in disbelief. Some were crying, others wide-eyed with fear and awe. The flight attendants ran up and down the aisles, trying to calm the frightened passengers, but even they were tense, glancing repeatedly toward the cockpit, marveling at the courage of the girl inside. Emma, good, hold it steady, ATC's voice continued, calm and patient. You're doing fine, minor corrections only, keep the plane level, focus on altitude and speed. She nodded silently, forcing herself to breathe. Her mind raced with calculations, the plane speed, the altitude, the pitch. She nudged the yoke, then adjusted the throttle, her small fingers trembling but precise. The plane leveled, then dipped slightly, another correction, a careful tilt, and it stabilized again. A sudden alert blared from the cockpit panel. One of the engines had begun to surge unpredictably. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She recalled her father explaining emergency procedures in the simulator. Calmly, she reduced throttle on that engine while maintaining the other, countering with subtle yoke adjustments. The plane trembled violently, but she fought against instinctive panic. She was small, young, inexperienced, but her focus was sharp, her courage unwavering. Flaps gently, adjust flaps, ATC instructed. Emma carefully lowered them, watching the airspeed stabilize. She could feel the subtle shift in the plane's balance, almost like a living being responding to her touch. Her mind locked on each instrument, every dial, every blinking light. The cabin was chaos, but inside the cockpit, time seemed to slow. Her heartbeat synchronized with the engine's vibrations. A sudden jolt of turbulence sent trays flying, spilling coffee and food across the aisle. A mother clutched her screaming child tightly, whispering reassurances. Passengers gripped seats, knees trembling. Emma felt their fear, their hope, and it strengthened her resolve. She was their lifeline. She could not falter. Emma, throttle, minor adjustments, hold heading, ATC instructed, calm but firm. She followed, each movement deliberate. The plane steadied under her careful guidance. A faint smile flickered on her face. Small victories, she realized, mattered. Each second of stability meant another step towards survival. She glanced at the pilots slumped over, unconscious. Their pale, still faces made her stomach churn but also steeled her nerves. They had trained for this, but now it was her hands, her mind, her courage keeping the plane alive. She adjusted the heading slightly, checking the instruments again. Another burst of turbulence rocked the plane, throwing passengers against their restraints. Emma countered, nudging the yoke, throttling carefully, and the plane leveled. Time stretched as minutes passed, each second heavy with tension. Emma felt exhaustion creeping in, but she refused to let it slow her. She spoke aloud softly, a mantra for herself. Steady, steady, level, small movements, calm. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it anchored her focus. A flight attendant peeked into the cockpit, marveling at Emma's composure. She's incredible, she whispered. A child flying a plane. The words barely seemed real. In the cabin, passengers exchanged astonished glances, the reality of what was unfolding sinking in. A 12-year-old girl was manually piloting a commercial plane through turbulence, system failures, and an unfolding crisis. Emma's attention returned to the controls. The flaps were adjusted, the engines responding, the autopilot completely disengaged. Every movement now required precision, every adjustment life-saving. Another burst of turbulence made the plane dip suddenly. Emma's small hands pushed the yoke gently but firmly, countering the tilt. The plane stabilized. Relief flooded her briefly, but she knew the worst was yet to come: descent and landing. "Emma, you're handling this remarkably," ATC's voice said calmly. "But prepare for the next phase. You'll need to maintain altitude and speed while we walk you through descent procedures. This will be the hardest part, but we'll guide you every step." Her pulse quickened at the word descent. Landing a plane was nothing like keeping it steady mid-flight. She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down, but she focused, remembering her father's words. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's action despite it. She had come this far. She could not falter now. The passengers began to settle slightly, sensing the plane's stabilization. A mixture of awe and hope replaced some of the panic. Emma stole a glance at their faces on the cabin cameras, wide-eyed, some whispering prayers, some holding hands. They had entrusted their lives to a 12-year-old girl, and she would not fail them. Another jolt of turbulence shook the plane, stronger than before. Emma pressed her lips together, adjusting the throttle, nudging the yoke, moving the flaps slightly. The plane responded, leveling again. Relief mixed with adrenaline surged through her, a strange, intoxicating combination. She could do this. She was doing this. "Good, Emma, excellent," ATC said. "Keep the plane steady. You're controlling it beautifully. Stay calm, we'll guide you through the next steps." The cabin erupted in whispers and quiet cheers. The impossible had already begun to feel possible. And as Emma held the yoke with trembling but unwavering hands, she realized something profound. She wasn't just controlling a plane, she was controlling hope, survival, and the faith of dozens of people. The turbulence began to ease slightly, giving her a moment to breathe. But Emma knew the next challenge loomed: descent, approach, and landing. She exhaled, wiped her sweaty hands on her pants, and tightened her grip on the controls. Courage had carried her this far, and it would carry her further. At 4.5 kilometers above a world oblivious to the drama unfolding in the skis, a 12-year-old girl had taken command. The plane, turbulent and alarming moments ago, now followed her gentle, deliberate movements. And though fear lingered, determination blazed brighter. The mid-flight crisis had been tamed, but the story was far from over. The real test, the landing, awaited. The runway lights appeared in the distance like faint, glowing beacons of hope. Emma's stomach churned at the sight. Descent was no longer a hypothetical exercise. It was real, immediate, and terrifying. The plane wobbled slightly in the turbulent air, the hum of the engines a constant reminder that everything depended on her small, untrained hands. Sweat streamed down her face, mixing with tears she refused to shed. She gritted her teeth, recalling every lesson her father had ever shown her, every simulator session they had shared. "Emma," ATC's calm, deliberate voice came over the radio, "will guide you step by step. Slow, gentle adjustments. Flaps down, throttle steady, approach aligned with the runway." Emma nodded, hands gripping the yoke tightly. She adjusted the throttle in small increments, following every instruction precisely. The flaps extended with a hiss, and she felt the plane's balance shift subtly. Every small adjustment sent her heart racing, but she forced herself to stay calm. She was not just flying a plane, she was fighting for the lives of every passenger. The cabin held its collective breath. Passengers pressed closer to windows, some gripping seat handles, some silently whispering prayers. Flight attendants whispered words of encouragement while trying to keep others calm. Cameras recorded every moment. No one could believe what was unfolding. A 12-year-old girl was attempting the impossible, landing a commercial airplane. Emma's eyes flicked to the runway ahead, trying to gauge distance, angle, and descent rate. Her hands moved instinctively, guided by a combination of memory, instruction, and raw courage. She whispered aloud, as if talking to the plane would help steady it. "Steady, level, slow, keep it straight." A sudden jolt of turbulence sent a wave of panic through the cabin, but Emma countered it instinctively, nudging the yoke and adjusting throttle. The plane leveled again, a small victory in the face of mounting fear. She could do this. She had to do this. Failure was not an option. ATC's voice guided her patiently. Altitude steady, slow your descent slightly, keep the nose aligned with the runway. Good, Emma, excellent. Her pulse thundered. Each instruction was a lifeline. She made micro-adjustments, feeling the vibrations through the yoke, sensing every subtle shift. The plane responded, wobbling slightly but obedient to her touch. One step at a time, Emma felt the impossible becoming possible. The wind gusted suddenly, slamming against the fuselage. The plane tilted dangerously, sending passengers clinging to seats, bracing for impact. Emma countered with precise nudges, keeping the aircraft aligned. Her knuckles whitened on the yoke, sweat dripping into her eyes. She blinked rapidly, trying to maintain focus, her mind a whirlwind of instruments, instructions, and fear. Flaps, lower slightly, adjust throttle, ATC instructed. Emma, her movements deliberate and careful. The plane responded with a slight dip, then leveled again. She exhaled sharply, a tiny spark of confidence igniting within her. Each success, no matter how small, reinforced her courage. From the cabin, whispers of awe and disbelief spread. Some passengers cried quietly, others held hands, and a few murmured prayers. The impossible was unfolding before their eyes. A child was guiding them towards safety with unmatched bravery. Flight attendants glanced at the cockpit repeatedly, awe and admiration reflected in their eyes. Emma's hands were raw, her arms trembling, but she refused to falter. The plane's descent continued, slowly and carefully, guided by her instincts and ATC's calm instructions. The runway drew closer, the lights brighter, more real with every passing second. Each adjustment of the yoke, each minor throttle change, was a battle against fear and physics alike. Almost there, Emma, keep it steady, approach perfect, minor corrections only. ATC's voice was calm, unwavering. She bit her lip, eyes fixed on the runway. Her hands moved deftly, small nudges on the yoke keeping the plane's nose level. The landing gear indicator confirmed readiness. She could hear the faint whine of the hydraulics as the wheels prepared for contact. Her heart raced faster, adrenaline surging. Every passenger's life was in her hands, yet she felt a strange clarity. Fear had been replaced by focus. She was the pilot. Another gust of wind shook the plane violently. Emma adjusted throttle and yoke, praying the tiny adjustments would suffice. The cabin erupted in gasps and whispers as the aircraft wobbled closer to the ground. She could see the runway's texture, the white lines approaching, the green and red lights guiding her path. Flaps full, maintain speed, nose steady, ATC instructed. Emma obeyed, nudging the plane carefully, her eyes locked on the runway. Time seemed to stretch. Each second was an eternity, yet she moved with calm precision. She could almost feel the plane responding, as if recognizing the hands guiding it. The wheels touched the tarmac with a jolt, bouncing slightly before settling. The plane rolled, tilting gently from side to side as Emma corrected, hands trembling but unwavering. Tires screeched softly against the runway. A wave of relief surged through her, but she did not relax entirely. Maintaining control until the plane came to a full stop was critical. Passengers erupted into applause and tears. Some screamed with relief, others held onto loved ones, hearts racing. The cabin was alive with emotion, every individual aware of the miracle they had just witnessed. Flight attendants cheered softly, their faces wet with tears, while others hugged children, whispering words of gratitude and disbelief. Emma's hands shook as she gradually brought the plane to a complete stop. She released the yoke slowly, breathing heavily. Sweat poured down her face, but her eyes sparkled with triumph. She had done the impossible. A 12-year-old girl had landed a commercial plane safely, saving dozens of lives at 4.5 kilometers above the Earth. ATC's voice came over the radio, warm and filled with awe. "Emma, you did it. Absolutely incredible. Everyone is alive thanks to you." Her father rushed into the cockpit, embracing her tightly. "Emma, my brave girl, you saved everyone," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. Emma exhaled, trembling, exhausted, and yet proud. She glanced at the pilots, now slowly regaining consciousness, their faces pale but grateful. She had stepped into the unknown, faced fear, and emerged victorious. Lives had been saved by courage, determination, and quick thinking. The passengers began to exit, some hugging each other, some kneeling to thank the crew and the girl who had become their hero. Cameras and news crews would later capture the moment for the world to see, but in that cockpit, there was only relief, pride, and the quiet acknowledgement of an extraordinary achievement. Emma wiped her sweaty hands on her pants, heart still racing. She had faced what no child or adult should ever face, yet she had risen to the challenge. The plane had landed safely. The impossible had been accomplished. At 12 years old, Emma had proven that courage knows no age. She had faced fear, odds, and emerged as a symbol of hope, skill, and bravery. The world below continued unaware, but in that cockpit a young girl had changed lives forever. The roar of the engines quieted as the plane came to a complete stop on the tarmac. Relief swept through the cabin, mingling with disbelief and awe. Passengers unbuckled, some trembling, some weeping, some clapping with a mixture of joy and incredulity. A 12-year-old girl had just landed a commercial airplane safely. The reality of the situation slowly began to sink in. Emma leaned back in her seat, hands still trembling, eyes wide. Her heart still raced, but the overwhelming weight of fear had been replaced by a quiet, triumphant relief. Her father rushed into the cockpit, hugging her tightly, his face streaked with tears. "Emma, you did it. You saved everyone. You're amazing," he whispered, voice choked with emotion. Emma hugged him back, her small body shaking, but she smiled faintly, exhausted but proud. I just did what I had to, Dad," she said softly. "I didn't have a choice." The pilots, now regaining consciousness, looked dazed. The captain blinked repeatedly, then focused on the girl who had just taken control. We owe you our lives," he said, voice trembling. The co-pilot nodded, still pale but grateful. The cabin erupted in murmurs of astonishment. Passengers craned their necks, trying to glimpse the young hero who had taken charge when adults could not. Flight attendants moved swiftly through the cabin, assisting passengers to gather belongings and exit safely. They whispered among themselves, their faces full of awe. One whispered to another, "Can you believe it? A 12-year-old, she actually did it." News crews had already begun to arrive, their cameras rolling, capturing the scene. Reporters spoke in hushed, urgent tones into microphones, narrating the miraculous story of a child saving dozens of lives. Cameras zoomed in on Emma as she emerged from the cockpit, escorted by her father and the flight crew. Flashing lights reflected in her eyes as she stepped onto the tarmac, but she held her head high, overwhelmed but composed. Passengers began to emerge as well, some hugging each other tightly, others offering words of gratitude to the young girl who had become their savior. Children clung to their parents, wide-eyed and awestruck. Elderly passengers whispered prayers of thanks. The atmosphere was surreal, a mixture of relief, disbelief, and admiration. Emma's father crouched to her level, holding her hands in his. "Emma, you've done something incredible. People will remember this forever. You've saved lives today." I just tried to stay calm and do what I knew," she replied softly, her voice trembling. "I wanted to help. I didn't think I'd actually have to." The pilots approached her, shaking her hands respectfully. "You are a hero, Emma," the captain said solemnly. "Do you realize what you just accomplished? Most adults couldn't have handled that. You saved everyone." Emma's cheeks flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and pride. She had never imagined herself as a hero. She had simply acted out of necessity, driven by instinct and the lessons her father had taught her. Yet here, in the quiet aftermath, she understood the gravity of her actions. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and danger, and she had emerged victorious. ATC operators were on speakerphones now, their voices filled with admiration and relief. Emma, what you did today was incredible. You stayed calm, focused, and precise under unimaginable pressure. You are truly remarkable." The passengers clapped and cheered, some wiping tears from their eyes. The surreal experience began to settle into the hearts of those. They had witnessed something extraordinary, a child stepping up when no adult could, demonstrating courage, intelligence, and poise beyond her years. Journalists swarmed the scene, microphones thrust toward her, cameras flashing. "Emma, how did you stay so calm?" one reporter asked. Emma hesitated, glancing at her father. I just focused on the plane, on what I needed to do step by step. I didn't think about what could go wrong. I just tried to keep everyone safe." Her humility struck everyone present. She did not boast, did not exaggerate. She had acted out of courage and necessity, not for recognition. Yet the world was already beginning to recognize her bravery. The news spread quickly, first through social media, then national news channels. Headlines screamed with amazement. 12-year-old saves plane, hero in the skis, child pilot lands commercial flight after emergency. Emma's story captivated millions. People marveled at her composure, courage, and skill. She became an instant symbol of hope, bravery, and the extraordinary potential of ordinary people, even children, in the face of danger. Back at the airport, emergency services ensured every passenger was safe. Medical personnel checked on the crew and passengers, but thanks to Emma's precise control, no injuries were reported beyond minor bumps and bruises. Families hugged, children clung to parents, and the sense of collective relief was palpable. Amid the commotion, Emma remained quiet, processing the whirlwind of events. She had faced a terrifying situation, piloted a plane, and landed it safely. Yet despite the praise, she remained humble. She hugged her father again, whispering, "I'm glad everyone's okay. That's all that matters." The pilots lingered nearby, speaking softly to one another but never taking their eyes off Emma. They were in awe of her composure and capability. "We owe her everything," the co-pilot murmured. "Everything." As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow over the tarmac, Emma and her father walked toward the waiting crowd of reporters and passengers. Cameras clicked, microphones were thrust forward, and people cheered. Yet in the midst of it all, Emma remained calm, grounded, and quietly proud. She had acted out of necessity, but her courage and quick thinking had saved lives. Later, as she sat quietly in the airport lounge with her father, Emma reflected on what had happened. She had been terrified, yet focused. She had made decisions under pressure no adult would envy. She had faced fear, chaos, and uncertainty, and prevailed. In the quiet after the storm, she understood that bravery was not about absence of fear, but action despite it. News anchors replayed footage of the landing, analyzing her every movement, praising her composure and courage. Social media exploded with admiration, people sharing the story worldwide. For Emma, the whirlwind of attention was overwhelming, but she remained humble. She had acted out of necessity, not for fame or recognition. Yet the world could not ignore what she had done. In that moment, Emma understood the weight and beauty of courage. She had faced the unimaginable and in doing so, had shown the world that age was not a limit to bravery, intelligence, or determination. Emma sat quietly in the lounge, her small hands wrapped around a cup of lukewarm tea. Around her, the airport buzzed with reporters, camera crews, and passengers recounting the extraordinary events of the day. The flight crew lingered nearby, still in awe of what had just transpired. Though exhausted, Emma's mind was racing, not with fear but with reflection. She had faced the impossible and succeeded. The weight of what she had done began to sink in. Her father sat beside her, holding her hand gently. "Emma, everyone is talking about you. People all over the country, all over the world. You've become a symbol of courage," he said softly, pride shining in his eyes. I just tried to help," Emma replied quietly, her voice small but steady. She felt a mixture of pride and disbelief herself. How had a 12-year-old girl ended up in the cockpit of a commercial airliner, landing it safely under impossible circumstances. She had acted out of necessity, but the world now called her a hero. News crews surrounded them, microphones thrust forward, cameras flashing. "Emma, how did you stay so calm?" a reporter asked. Emma glanced at her father and then at the floor. "I focused on what I had to do. I tried to think about the steps, step by step. I didn't think about what could go wrong. I just did what I thought was right," she said, voice steady despite the nerves buzzing in her stomach. The media coverage was immediate and intense. Social media exploded with hashtags: "Young Hero," "Emma Saves Flight," "Courage in the Skis." Videos of her adjusting the yoke, communicating with ATC, and guiding the plane to a safe landing circulated worldwide. People marveled at the bravery and composure of a child who had faced fear directly and acted decisively. Passengers emerged from the terminal offering stories of awe and gratitude. One elderly man shook his head, tears in his eyes. "She saved us. A child saving lives, I'll never forget this." Children stared at her in wonder, parents whispering explanations of bravery and courage. Emma's story spread like wildfire, capturing the hearts of people everywhere. Letters poured in, some from children, some from adults, all expressing admiration and gratitude. Schools wrote, asking to invite her to speak. Pilots and aviation professionals called to commend her focus and precision. Despite the whirlwind of recognition, Emma remained grounded. She understood the weight of what she had done, but she also knew that courage often required quiet focus rather than applause. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and chaos, and she had acted. That alone was enough. The airline organized a formal ceremony later that week. Emma, dressed neatly in a small blazer, stood before a crowd of passengers, crew members, pilots, and executives. Her father was beside her, holding her hand tightly. The CEO stepped forward, handing her a certificate of bravery and a small medal. "Emma," he said, voice full of respect, "your courage, focus, and determination saved the lives of every person on board Flight 422. You have set an example for the world, proving that heroism knows no age. We are honored to recognize your extraordinary bravery." Emma blushed, glancing down at the medal in her hand. I just tried to do what was right," she said quietly. The crowd erupted in applause, cheers echoing throughout the hall. Pilots approached her afterward, some shaking her hand, others hugging her gently. "You demonstrated composure under pressure most adults never achieve," the captain said. "We are grateful beyond words." Her story made headlines across national and international media. Television anchors repeated the incredible details. Journalists interviewed passengers who recounted the moment they realized a 12-year-old was piloting their plane. Experts in aviation praised her focus, instincts, and poise. Psychologists analyzed her ability to manage stress. Yet despite all the attention, Emma remained humble. She had acted out of necessity, not for recognition. The impact of Emma's bravery extended far beyond the plane or the airport. Children wrote letters to her, inspired by her courage. Schools invited her to speak about handling fear, staying focused under pressure, and the power of doing the right thing, even when it seemed impossible. Communities held events celebrating her heroism, emphasizing the lesson that courage can emerge from anyone, regardless of age. Emma's parents marveled at their daughter's composure. "You've changed lives, Emma," her father said softly one evening as they sat together at home. "Not just on the plane, but for everyone who heard your story. You've shown people that bravery and focus can make a difference, no matter who you are." "I didn't feel brave," Emma admitted. "I was scared, really scared, but I had to keep going. I just focused on what to do next." Her mother squeezed her hand. "That's what makes you brave, Emma. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's what you do despite it." In the following weeks, Emma continued to receive messages of gratitude and admiration. She was invited to speak at schools, featured in magazines, and interviewed on television shows. Each time, she emphasized the importance of focus, preparation and calm decision-making under pressure. Her story inspired people to believe in their potential, no matter their age or experience. Though she became a public figure almost overnight, Emma remained a 12-year-old girl at heart. She returned to school, played with friends, and continued her love of aviation through simulators and lessons. But everything she did carried a quiet dignity now, a reminder of what she had accomplished in a single, extraordinary day. The plane that had once been a vessel of fear and uncertainty became a symbol of hope and courage. The passengers and crew never forgot the child who had taken control when no adult could. Aviation authorities studied her actions, incorporating her story into training materials as a case study of composure under extreme pressure. Emma's bravery left an indelible mark on everyone who heard the story. She had faced the unimaginable, acted decisively, and saved dozens of lives. The world saw her as a hero, a symbol of courage and possibility, but Emma saw herself simply as a girl who had done what she had to do. Years later, she would recall that day with clarity: the roar of engines, the alarms, the trembling passengers, the feeling of responsibility pressing down on her small shoulders. But she would also remember the triumph, the exhilaration, and the knowledge that fear could be conquered through focus, courage, and determination. And in that legacy, Emma's story lived on, not just as a tale of extraordinary heroism, but as a reminder that bravery can emerge from the most unexpected places, and that even a 12-year-old girl can rise to meet the impossible.